Welcome back to another Micmac tabletop review. Today we'll be taking a look at the Mauser 1914 .32 caliber 4th variant semi-automatic pistol. Here's a beautiful example of a historic Mauser model 1914 pistol. This odd-looking small .32 caliber pistol was produced in several variations between 1914 and 1934. It was based on the smaller 25 caliber Mauser 1910, but made a bit more robust and larger in order to handle the .32 round. By the way, Mauser didn't give model names to their pistols, only referring to their caliber. Collectors have taken to refer to these pistols by their year of introduction. So we have the Mauser model 1914 .32, or M1914, or just the 1914. It's estimated that Mauser produced about 1 million of these pistols, so there are a lot of them made. This particular pistol is a 4th variant of the 1914 produced later in the series, from 1923 but before 1929. We know that by its serial number, which begins with 315,000. 4th variant serial numbers range from about 290,000 to about 467,000. So with this pistol's lower serial number within this range, we can safely guess that it would have been probably produced in 1923 or 1924. As you can see, it's in very, very nice condition for a pistol produced 100 years ago. For perspective, size-wise, as you can see, it's about the same size and dimensions proportionally as the Walter PPKS. Interest in the Mauser 1914 stems particularly from its link to World War I. The First World War began on the 28th of July 1914 and ended on the 11th of November 1918. So earlier produced M1914s are usually more sought after, and only a small number of those were actually connected to military service. The bulk of the 1914s like this one were produced after the war. I found this gun in a private collection earlier this year. I was surprised to see it with a price tag of $500 out the door because of its excellent condition, better than 90%. While it's not without a few minor blemishes, the bluing is very good throughout, and the walnut grips are in amazing condition for their age. They may actually be newer than the gun, but given what wear there is and the overall condition of the gun otherwise, I don't think so. Even the magazine is pristine. This gun has probably lived most of its life in someone's safe. This gun is very tight and the action smooth as silk. I've seen nice Mauser 1914s before, but usually with price tags closer to $1,000. Actually, most of the Mauser 1914s are at auctions and are usually not as nice as this one, with prices starting between $500 and $600, to which I would need to add shipping and transfer fees. So this one at $500 out the door, well, it was hard to pass up. I didn't even try to negotiate a lower price. Now, before we go any further, let's make sure this gun is cleared first. And by the way, if you enjoy this review, be sure to like, share, and subscribe. You probably know the Mauser name because of its association with the well-known Mauser Model 1871 rifle, or the Mauser 98 rifle, and perhaps with the Mauser Military Model 1896 pistol, or C96, commonly referred to as the broom-handled Mauser pistol. These were indeed highly successful designs, but only a few of many that would follow. Mauser firearms were famous worldwide. By contrast, today, the Mauser 1914 pistol just isn't as well known, but back in its day during the First World War, the Mauser 1914 became one of the most important handguns of the early 20th century. The Mauser 1914 was primarily designed as a law enforcement pistol with an eye on commercial sales, in which it was very successful. By the way, chambered in the .32 ACP for law enforcement would have been pretty common for the era. And note that Mauser 1914 is actually a real pocket-sized pistol, which is one of its attractions. Although I find that there are a number of potential snag points on this pistol, still the Mauser 1914 was considered a very good pocket carry pistol during its time. Personally, I think the background on the .32 ACP Mauser 1914 pistol is fascinating, and it begins with an earlier variant, the .25 ACP Mauser 1910. Now, we usually think of handgun families, that is, whole series of handguns that share the same basic design, ergonomics, and tooling, as being a kind of a Glock thing. That is to say, if you've seen one Glock, you've seen them all regardless of their size or caliber.
You also see a little of that with the open slide Beretta models.
But back then, pistol designs reflected their specific purpose. Nonetheless, that was the original precise intent of the Mauser pocket pistol series, which began with Joseph Nickel of Austria. Joseph Nickel proposed a family of handguns ranging from 25 ACP to larger military calibers like 9mm and later 45 ACP. In 1904, he was hired by Mauser, and in 1905, he was put in charge of a handgun project to produce a 9mm bullback handgun. Unfortunately, his choice of unlock breech action resulted in handguns that were too large to make saleable products. By 1909, it became clear that the blowback operation was ill-suited to the 9mm cartridge. But Nickel saw the potential for his design applied to smaller caliber firearms and eventually resulted in the 25 caliber Model 1910 pistol, which sold very well, being one of the most ergonomic and easy to shoot of the 25 ACP pistols at the time. And later, beefing up the firearm to handle a larger caliber, Nickel designed the 32 caliber Model 1914. As for variants, the Mauser 1914 variants were not formally numbered as variants. Rather, changes are noted by us today by serial number and observed design changes. Usually improvements, but sometimes they were just driven by manufacturing demands. For example, the first major change to the 1914 was a reduction in mass to what was referred to as the humpback design of the slide, making it lighter and easier to produce. Following variants, changes were more subtle. By the way, only about 100,000 were destined for military, and the Mauser 1914 was still considered more for commercial and law enforcement use. Frankly, that may have helped Mauser return the 1914 to production after the war. By the time we get to the fourth variant of the pistol, it still looks pretty much the same. And it's the fourth variant that was primarily reproduced after World War I. So after a shutdown in production following the end of the war, Mauser was able to return to production, and the fourth variant took up where it had left off for the most part. However, during the fifth variant, or the transitional variant, production period just before the change to the sixth variant, or the Mauser 1934, we see simplifications and the inclusion of stamped parts as well as softer bluing finish. Personally, that's why I prefer the fourth variant over the later models, but that's just me. Obviously, those stamped with military proofs will be more attractive to collectors. As I said earlier, these fourth variant Mauser 1914s were produced between 1923 and 1929. Approximately 178,000 fourth variant Mauser 1914s were made and are identified by all capital letter 2-line slide address, like on the left side as you can see on this one. The fourth variant 1914s were the first to be exported after World War I. They were imported into the United States by Stoger of New York, and here you see Germany stamped on the left side here, suggesting this particular pistol was intended for export. By the way, while there may be plenty of Germany stamped 1914s out there, this is the only one I've ever seen. Note the German double crown over U proof is stamped behind the rear sight. Otherwise, there's no other proof or export markings on this gun. By the way, a lot of these 1914s were exported to Japan, believe it or not, so it's not uncommon to see a Japanese oval marking on the right side of the frame above the grip near the rear. As for packaging, this Mauser 1914 .32 pistol didn't come with anything except one magazine. I don't think I've ever seen a Mauser 1914 with any packaging, but I would think any packaging would have been dependent upon the importer or provided by the seller. Occasionally I've seen Mauser 1914s with a period type holster and sometimes with even an extra magazine. This is where I try to find movies that feature the firearms I'm reviewing. It's not surprising that the Mauser 1914, being such an old classic pistol, would be found in quite a few movies dating all the way back to the 1928 movie Spies. Just to mention a couple more recent, there's the 2016 film The Promise, in which an American woman is seen firing a Mauser 1914, and the 2022 streaming film adaptation of the 1928 anti-war novel All Quiet on the Western Front. As for specifications, the Mauser 1914 were German-made, striker-fired, high-quality, blowback design pistols. Barrel length is 3.3 inches. Overall length is 6 inches. Height is 4.4 inches. Width is about 1.1 inches at the wood grips. Finish is blued steel. Serial numbers are located here on the forward left side of the slide and on the rear of the frame here, and the last 3 digits here on the underside of this plate. The grips are wraparound walnut. Sights include a half-moon front blade and a small combat-style notched dovetail rear sight. As for the safety, push this lever down to lock. To deactivate the fire, this button must be depressed. Magazine capacity 8 rounds with a heel-type magazine release here. There's a little cocked indicator button here. The takedown unit is here under the barrel. Unloaded weight is 21.5 ounces. Now before we head out to the range, let's take a closer look at this pistol. I've had this pistol apart for inspection, cleaning, and oiling. This pistol is in excellent shape overall for being 100 years old. Still nice and tight. Excellent craftsmanship. Nice barrel with sharp lands and grooves rifling. There's very little, if anywhere. It's already very clean, so this gun probably most of its life in a safe somewhere. Probably not been shot much. Springs still seem good. Magazine looks almost new, only minor scratches. Even the finish is still good. Only a little bit of blemish here on the left side frame here, and minor bit of holster wear from what I can tell. And a little surface damage on the right side butt here on these wood grips, but basically very, very nice little gun. As for function, you can realistically view the Mauser 1914 as a pocket pistol, sort of similar in dimensions to the Walther PPKS or Glock 42. Being an all-metal gun, it may seem a little heavy, but it's actually the same weight as the Walther PPKS. These wood grips provide a nice full feel, and the stippling is moderate but feels good. For me, I can only get 2.5 fingers around this gun, but it still feels okay. Note that there's no beaver tail, so slide biting could occur. The safety sticks out a little, but it's in the right location to engage. Move this lever down to set. Unfortunately, you've got to press this button here to release the safety, and it has to be pressed directly in, which is really rather difficult on this gun. Very stiff and a little awkward. The slide serrations are small, but the swell makes them work well enough. Racking is rather stiff. Building heaviness as it is pulled back to cock, maybe 10 pounds. The slide will lock open after the last round is fired. Releasing the slide requires inserting a magazine, empty or loaded. The magazine release is a European heel type release. It's very stiff. Magazine loads are easy enough, but the magazine spring is still very good. Trigger take up is about 1/4 inch, tightening through another 1/4 inch to the wall, then a crisp snap. Measured trigger pull weight, average 5.1 pounds. Reset is a smooth 1/4 inch release with an audible and tactical click. Very nice. By the way, be careful handling this gun because it's small, and at least this one is very tight and stiff operationally. I found it's easy to get pinched when racking the slide, releasing the slide, returning a magazine, or when field stripping. Okay, let's get this gun to the range for a little target practice, see how well it shoots. I'm going to be shooting Magtech 71 grain jacketed hollow point 32 auto here today because, well, that's what I've got. As old as this gun is, I wouldn't recommend hollow points, but like I said, it's what I've got today. And I'm using a profile target that's a little smaller than a real person. The head is only 3.5 inches wide, but it'll do for our needs. And given this gun's age and historical value, I'm not going to overdo it. I'll just be shooting a couple magazines here today. Since this Mauser 1914 is the same size and weight as my Walther PPKS, which with I've had a lot of practice, I'm going to set the target out to 24 feet, my usual training distance for self-defense handguns. This gun is small, but the grip feels really pretty good. Feels solid. Sights allow for a decent sight picture. Okay, the M1914 isn't a target pistol, but let's see how I do. Oops, looks like a stovepipe round. I was afraid this gun wouldn't handle hollow points. Okay, it appears that I didn't seat the first round properly into the magazine. That might be my fault. I usually tap the magazine on the table after loading to make sure that the rounds are all aligned properly, and I didn't do that here. Let's try that again with a few less rounds loaded. Now that's more like it. Very good trigger, but the trigger guard is small for my hands and the trigger feels a little crowded. Of course, I have large hands and long fingers. As a 32, the felt recoil is minimal. Let's try that again. This isn't the most comfortable gun for me to shoot to the gun's small trigger guard and grip angle, but still, overall, it's a very nice pistol. Good accuracy. For someone with smaller hands, this could actually be a very nice compact defensive carry pistol. As for cons, the Mauser 1914 is probably not a gun for those with weak hands. While smooth, the action and racking are stiff, and the safety release button and heel magazine require pretty strong fingers to operate. Some think the 1914 looks a little odd. Many would suggest that the Mauser 1914 as an 8-round 32 is certainly underpowered by today's standards, and it's rather heavy for a realistic pocket carry pistol. Some people think the button safety release is just plain ridiculous as a practical system to ready the gun for use under fire, although the thinking at the time was that two separate and distinct motions would better clarify the safety on and off functions. This gun also has a rather complicated construction, lots of parts. One more complaint has to do with there being no slide release on this gun. You have to return the magazine in order to release the slide. Well, as for pros, while I just bashed the Mauser 1914 two-part safety system, there are those that really thought it helped in the commercial market. Many actually view the Mauser 1914 as a very safe gun to carry just because of its safety. And while I had difficulty operating the safety off one-handed with my thumb, I've seen others do it without any problem, so this one may just not be representative. Likewise, many saw the slide staying open after the last round is fired and then staying open when the magazine is removed and finally flying forward to chamber a round when the magazine is reinserted, making the gun good to go as a really convenient and well thought out design. As for the Mauser 1914's construction, yes, there are a lot of moving parts, but that was the result of the influence from other Mauser models that benefit this pistol with very smooth and solid operation. Finally, and importantly, the Mauser 1914 has a reputation for reliability and accuracy, and I have to admit, this is indeed a really nice little pistol. Craftsmanship, fit and finish are all outstanding. Field stripping the Mauser 1914 isn't difficult. By the way, there are plenty of videos out there on complete disassembly of this gun if you need, but we're just going to field strip it. Begin with an empty magazine in place and locking the slide back. Then release the magazine and pull it out a little, but leave it in the gun. Next, push this little serrated release button at the end of the frame under the barrel here and rotate this takedown mechanism here up counterclockwise. You can now pull this rod out and set it aside. Now you can lift up on the barrel a little to remove the barrel forward and off the gun. Next, we need to release the slide, but make sure to hold on to the slide when you replace the magazine, which will release the slide. Allow the slide to come forward, but to remove you'll need to now drop the magazine. This will allow the slide to come forward and off the frame. Remove the recoil spring and rod. Now remove the firing pin or striker and its spring. Basically, that's it. Reassembly is just the opposite. Return the striker and firing pin spring to the slide. Return the recoil spring and rod to the frame. With the magazine inserted but not all the way home, return the slide to the frame, But note the recoil spring has to fit into this area here on the slide. Once it's captured, bring the slide back and lock open on the frame. Now we can return the barrel to the slide. It drops down into its holes. Then return the long takedown pin with its tab facing over to the right at 9 o'clock from the muzzle. Then you have to press in on this little serrated button to be able to rotate the tab down to its 6 o'clock position. Finish up by pushing the magazine home, which will release the slide. Then test for function. That's it. As for value, Genetron.com currently suggests an average price of about $570 for a used Mauser 1914. True Gun Value is more conservative and suggests a used average value of $460 and points out that the 1914's value has dropped about $50 since last year. Also, the trade-in value of a Mauser 1914 is about $300. However, recent real national sales seem to reflect a range of $350 to $1,000 depending on version and condition. That's a pretty wide price range. I have to say that I commonly see Mauser 1914s that are in pretty nice condition, like this one, offered for around $900. And I've also seen ones in pretty rough condition at gun shows priced at and still selling for around $400 to $500. So if you can find one in good condition for about $500, that'd actually be a fair price in my opinion. Certainly if the gun has military markings, it would be worth a lot more. Now before we end today's video, I'd like to remind you, if you haven't already, please be sure to like, share, and subscribe down below. And thanks for watching. In a nutshell, the Mauser 1914 is a .32 automatic pistol produced in various variations in Germany between 1914 and 1934. A lot of these pistols were produced, about 1 million, and many exported to the United States. As a result, they aren't difficult to find and parts are still available. While their value has dropped a bit recently, they still command a fairly good price and are considered a decent collectible pistol. The Mauser 1914s were fairly well made, so many examples of these guns in good condition are still out there. The Mauser 1914 has a few quirky design elements, but still represents a dependable, reliable, accurate little pistol about the size and weight of the Walther PPKS. Now wrapping up, the German-made Mauser 1914 is a popular, intelligently designed pocket-sized .32 semi-automatic pistol. It's a little odd, but aesthetically pleasing and a good example of early German design, innovation, and engineering excellence. It also helped that Mausers were well known for their high quality standards. Actions that function smoothly, excellent reliability, decent accuracy, and a good level of safety. Today, this fourth variant model may not be the most desirable, but I think it's a nice solid example of the Mauser 1914. At $500 for this fourth variant model, I feel I did okay buying this one, and honestly I have to say, I own quite a few .32 caliber pistols, and this Mauser 1914 ranks up there with some of the very best of them when it comes to its overall shooting qualities. Really, well worth trying one out if you get a chance. Any weapon you carry, it's better than the one you left at home. Thanks for watching. Hope you'll be back for my next tabletop review. Until next time, stay safe.